Okay, dear friends, welcome back. Lecture number 3 of this series of 4. Our title today will be Lady Gaga in Otaniemi, and I'm going to use a couple of openings from this tremendous artist as we go along here. But my main hope for today is that that it will be beautiful, a little bit like the beautiful autumn day we have today here in Finland. It's this kind of particular, I think, radiance about the yellow that you see in the trees on this kind of clear morning, and it's like future through the leaves, but at the same time you are giving up something. So the beauty of that is something I would like to have present in our experience of today. And to that effect, let me start with my pretty private experience. It's yesterday there was a showing of what is likely to become here in Finland the #1 film, the most talked about film, because it's based on perhaps the most famous and for Finns extremely significant novel called The Unknown Soldier. So there's a new film based on that, but there already was pretty shortly after the book was published in the early 50s a film which became a classic and is shown every Independence Day, the original one. But there's now a new film about that, and it was shown yesterday. So it was very, very powerful an experience, and maybe even got into my my dreams. I mean, I didn't sleep the way I normally sleep, but often when I haven't really slept properly, if I feel tired, negative thoughts and pessimistic thoughts come to my mind more easily than had I slept properly. So as I was approaching Otaniemi, this kind of somewhat pessimistic thoughts crept in my mind. Things like, given the fact that I'm so tired, my English is likely to be incredibly bad. Maybe I can't even pronounce the word change because I don't remember to push the lips, kind of case, because I'm so tired. And I mean, the fact is that my English is it's not my native language, so I found it to be somewhat unreliable a partner. So I thought I had rational reasons for believing that maybe it wouldn't be that great, and it's been captured in video, so it's going to be there forever. All those mispronunciations and grammatical mistakes and various sort of blunderings. So I was feeling somewhat low, while at the same time knowing it's such a beautiful morning. But somehow the knowledge of the fact that it's such a beautiful morning, I love the Finnish autumn, didn't help me, as it were, subjectively, which only made it worse. So from some kind of meta level, there was this kind of internal dialogue, and with this somewhat pessimistic internal dialogue, I entered the Design Factory building here in the Aalto Otaniemi campus, and the first person I meet is Professor Ekman, who has founded this Design Factory that to me is one of the greatest things that Aalto University has created. I think it's a fabulous space for the kind of emergence that I believe in. So there is Professor Ekman coming with a bike. So they have a few bikes here that they use to get around the campus. So Professor Ekman comes with a little bike, and I shout to him, Professor Ekman, and he sort of nods to me, and he comes to me, and without saying anything, he offers his entire key set, the entire key set to me, and I'm a little bit sort of puzzled. Then he points to something in the key set, namely the kind of tap that one can use to get coffee from a particular coffee machine in the kitchen. And I like the coffee here in Design Factory. I mean, I sort of even think about it. The particular latte one gets here not as any kind of latte. I mean, I'm sort of Design Factory latte. So every now and then I hopefully walk into the kitchen hoping maybe there's somebody who can offer me a Design Factory latte, not just ordinary latte, Design Factory latte. So Professor Ekman gives him his entire key set, points to this tap that I know can be used to get the coffee, and says, well, I'll be back in a moment. And I felt, the strength of a tender and dynamic moment of meeting. It was amazing how that affected me. It sort of hit my plus button. And even when walking with my overcoat on to the kitchen, I knew that this is pretty irrational. I mean, this doesn't really make sense. It's just that this human connectivity, this kind of camaraderie, I felt from him, just felt good. It's somehow empowering. Is one of the things I would hope that our gathering here together would also form. And in order to get it going, let me suggest, also observing that we have some people here that haven't been here during the previous lectures. I mean, anybody can come in here, and I'm very happy to see it happening. So please stand up and generate tender and dynamic moments of meeting to people around you with power hugs and whatever forms seem appropriate. Here is Lady Gaga. This is from Time magazine. They have in Time magazine this 10 questions format, so some questions are being presented to interesting people, in this case Lady Gaga, and she comes out with the point that she's now really working with experts, really looking into the theme of loving kindness from the point of view of hopefully making it more normal for people to be kind of loving. Perhaps even cool. I mean, you can of course pick up from, let's say, positive psychology, from some scientific perspective that looks into positive phenomena in human life. Let's say friendship, kindness, love, and then learn about this phenomenon of, let's say, kindness. And that's an excellent thing to do, obviously, because we have our tremendous rational capabilities. But it still could turn out that you can't really, as it were, transform the knowledge of, let's say, of the benefits of kindness, gratitude, love into action. But here Lady Gaga is pointing to the challenge of trying to look into this theme from the point of view of making it reality. So to me this is an interesting perspective. Also observing the fact that if you are in her kind of business, if your profession is her kind of profession, there's no particular need why you should look into the theme of loving kindness. I mean, there are all kinds of things you need to look into if you want to be a performing artist, let's say. So if you want to express things, let's say, with the way you dress, which is one of her big themes, dressing for the occasion, because he wants also visually to break free from various conventions, various norms. He wants to challenge, let's say, how women are perceived and perhaps objectified. So you could say there are all kinds of things you need to do if you want to do at top level the kind of things that she wants to do given her profession. But I would say from those demands you can't really deduce in any obvious way the need to develop even your own loving kindness. So one could therefore ask, well, why would somebody then want to do it? Putting it slightly differently, notice that if there is a demand for you to develop in a particular way, and of course, given the fact that you study here at Aalto University, perhaps you are making a dissertation here at Aalto University, perhaps you have a startup along with your studies, there are all kinds of demands that relate to the kind of things you want to deliver, which make you to become interested in developing yourself from the point of view of being somebody one day who can deliver whatever that particular demand list demands more efficiently, better, with more quality than currently is the case. But I would say that being more kind, being more loving is not likely to be in the offing on the basis of any such external demands. But still somebody could come up with that kind of perspective. And if we again ask, well, how could somebody come up with that kind of perspective if it doesn't come from outside? You can say, well, it could come from inside. That, of course, being one of the themes we discussed at some length in the previous lecture, where we drew some inspiration from Quentin Tarantino's films. In particular, Pulp Fiction on the one hand, but Kill Bill also on the other hand. So we saw their characters that went deeper into themselves and found something. And as a result of finding something, they came out with something that wouldn't have been there merely on the basis of what were the demands from outside. So this to me is an interesting logic, an interesting possibility. I mean, think about it this way. There are all kinds of things that we might end up considering cool in our private lives. So, for instance, the students you hang out with are likely to consider something cool. So this is a human tendency to consider certain things cool and some other things not so cool. And many of the things we consider cool might indeed be worthy of being considered cool. So it could be that, for instance, the fact, and I think it is a fact, that nowadays among students, being in great physical fit is considered cool. I think it's good. I think it's great that a lot of students go out to exercise, and you see people jogging, you see people paying attention to what they eat, you see people being cautious about their drinking habits. I mean, even here in Otaniemi, that used to be, remember, an engineering school, there used to be, quite recently, the overall philosophy pretty dominant to the effect that it's cool to get drunk. And it's cool to drink beer. So this would mean, from the point of view of male students, for instance, that you could impress ladies by being able to drink, let's say, 4 liters of beer without going to the toilet. And in some sense you can say, well, that is sort of impressive. But if you consider some of the ladies that study here in Otaniemi as a result of Aalto, also of course in what used to be engineering disciplines, there's a lot of women nowadays there, many of them in tremendous physical fit. So you would say probably this kind of beer drinking behavior doesn't impress that much many of the ladies. But most guys are interested in ladies. So you could say that there is a change, noticed. There is a change. there's a change in what's considered cool when it comes to drinking, to some extent that has already taken place here in Otaniemi. But at the same time, of course, that suggests the question, could it be that there are other kind of things that haven't gone that strongly, at least, in what you could consider to be, as it were, life-affirming, some kind of life-enhancing, life-enriching direction? Like one of the examples from our Tarantino lecture, related to a speculative incident in the town of, well, city almost, of Kokkola. So in that example, I fell for somebody I met. At the time, things were difficult. It was speculative. But I illustrated the point through this example. So the idea was that when your children are small, it's easy to get distanced from your spouse, from your partner, from the person with whom you have the children, particularly if you have twins. Twins are very, very demanding in infancy. So it's easy to become distanced and easy to sort of become entrapped with all kinds of negative thoughts regarding the other one, because the other one doesn't deliver in a way that would be good from your point of view, and therefore from your point of view, from the point of view of the whole. So in that fictitious example from last time, I envisioned a situation where I would have an affair in Kokkola, and then in that fictitious line of thought would have led to me and the special lady Pipsa, the mother of my twin boys, divorcing, let's say at the age of 5, when the boys were 5. So that was an example from last time, and one question it suggests is that have I thought about that possibility already in advance? The answer is yes. I have thought about it. One reason why I have thought about it is because I see so many divorces taking place. And I would say it's a pretty good overall rule that if something is taking place in many instances, it might take place in your instance, although it might seem improbable at the current time. There clearly has to be something there that is sort of a trend that kind of sneaks in, so takes the person by surprise. So one might say, well, if something can take place by sort of sneaking in and taking the person or persons by surprise, surely it can happen to me. So what could prevent it? And this is now launching your system 2. This is now engaging with that power you have to engage in hypothetical thinking. It could happen. What might be some of the aspects? You use your imagination. Also, you put things together. Things that are not automatically together, but you put things together. You might observe, for instance, that in fact I get excited, even agitated, aroused perhaps by particular kind of people. I just observe it as a fact. Also, it could be that if I'm tired, if I'm intoxicated, experience indicates quite clearly that I might temporarily engage in thinking that I don't actually endorse afterwards. So observing all that, it could be that somebody could, for instance, ask the question, well, given the fact that I've met the person of my life, given the fact that we have children together, given the fact that this is the person with whom I so strongly felt that I want to spend my life with. Doesn't this mean that I should build myself against possible temporary temptations, to the effect that should that temptation then all of a sudden emerge at a time when I'm weak myself, for whatever reason, I'm able to resist the temptation. This is a possible line of thought. And you could say, well, could it even be that you might come to a conclusion regarding, in this case, let's say, staying faithful to one's spouse against what's considered cool in the culture in which you happen to live? I mean, it's obvious that in the culture in which you happen to live, there are all kinds of aspects regarding what's considered cool at any given time, which probably won't last that long. So maybe one should sort of, in some cases, make choices against what perhaps is considered cool generally, and perhaps even then come up with the kind of conclusion, well, this is not, let's say, staying faithful in a marriage. It's not considered that cool, generally speaking, but I consider it cool. This is a possible conclusion. There's a powerful moment in the film I just mentioned, The Unknown Soldier, well known for the Finns. It touches the Finns very strongly, this. There's a key character by the name of Koskela, who to many Finns, I would say quite generally for the Finns, not just for many Finns, I would say for Finns, this character represents what's the best in Finnish leadership. And you can say, well, what's the best in Finnish leadership from the point of view of Finns? I would say, well, remember, the Finnish society, it's not a class society. It's not a very hierarchical society. I mean, basically, people come from pretty much the similar kind of backgrounds. There are differences to some extent, but and there could be challenges to this in the future. But all in all, I mean, Finns feel pretty easily connected with other Finns. So if somebody, from the point of view of some external hierarchy, is in the top position, does this mean that this person is somehow different, humanly speaking, from the other ones? Of course not. But it could be that the hierarchical position presents a temptation to the person who has the position of adopting the kind of practices, the kind of talking routines, interaction styles that put down the other one, indicate the fact that we are on different level. And that's not Koskela. So in the film, he delivers a line regarding the formal way of speaking, generally used in the Finnish army when you talk to your superior. When you're talking to an officer, you're supposed to use the formal way of speaking. The formal way of speaking when addressing him that I mentioned in passing with the Eric Street example, it's seldom used outside that kind of contexts where hierarchy is strongly present. But he makes Koskela it explicit, you don't have to use that. But of course that applies only to me. With other officers, the case is different. Not making a number of it, just observing, this is me. We are in this together. So, coming up with one's own standards for what's cool, from my point of view, is what Lady Gaga here is bringing out regarding being kind and loving. I mean, in our culture, also in Finnish culture, I would say, Lady Gaga, of course, is speaking from the point of view of her culture, American culture. But even in Finland, it's not considered that cool to be kind. In fact, we know kindness is sort of boring. It's not considered to be a sort of a major attraction factor. So being kind often is downplayed by the various contexts in which somebody's life is taking place. There's not much as the encouragement. So if you are an actor, let's say, you don't really want to play kind roles because it's very hard to create character into a role of somebody who's kind. So it's much more exciting to have a role of somebody who's wicked, really evil, or in some ways, the kind of character that is pushing his or her own case very strongly. Kindness is not considered to be that interesting. But of course, somebody could still find it interesting. Somebody could think, I want to develop myself as a kind person. It's a possible line of thought. So, with this in mind, let me go into a little video cut. This is going to be about 3.5 minutes. And it's going to take us to Atlanta Olympics. And to a situation where Muhammad Ali comes to the basketball court at the final. So gold is at stake. There is USA playing against Yugoslavia. So gold at stake. But during the intermission, what happens is that Ali comes there. The reason Ali comes there, it turns out, it's a surprise to the audience. The reason Ali comes there is that he's going to get a replacement for the gold medal he had won in the Rome Olympics in 1960. That was his initial breakthrough. But he had lost the original gold. Now, he had been extremely powerful in the opening ceremony of the Atlanta Olympics, where he lit the Olympic flame. But given the fact that he has Parkinson, this is something that I would say anybody that saw it never forget. Because he has lost his brilliance of movement under tremendous pressure, that being his signature strength, that being his form of genius. But he has lost that. He has also lost another one of his signature strengths, his verbalism. Those he has lost, but he hasn't lost his human dignity. And you see it shining through him. I think also in this little video clip, I mean, he's pretty sort of poker-faced. He doesn't seem to express that much. He has also lost that to Parkinson. But if you follow closely, I think you can sense the emotional momentum building up. Then he gets the gold medal and picks it up with his hand trembling, and I think it's very, very touching, him kissing the gold medal, the ex-champion getting it again. But please pay attention what happens then. Because what happens is that in the game itself, as I said, there is US Dream Team playing against Yugoslavia. What happens is that once Ali has gotten the gold, picks it up and kisses it, the Dream Team guys come and hug him. So please pay attention to the effect this creates. So let's take a look, 2.5 minutes. Okay, I'll stop it there. I think this is such a powerful reminder of the strength of human connectivity, one form of which is touch. But not just any kind of touch. And I mean, somehow a human being can, as it were, even physiologically somehow differently experience a kind touch, an accepting touch, a generous touch, from a touch that wants to harm. And how unreserved the players are as they come. There's that one player who has his fingers taped, how tenderly he touches Ali on the cheek. And I mean, quite clearly, they love Ali and want to show it. In that situation, of course, there wasn't any particular demand to do so. From the point of view of the players, the gold medal is at stake. They're only leading by 5 points. I mean, this isn't decided, the game. Besides, this is Dream Team so-called, but it's not the original Dream Team. In fact, there was a lot of stuff, some of it's pretty ugly, in the press before the Atlanta Games regarding, is this team worthy the name Dream Team? Michael isn't there. You know, there are some, Magic isn't there. Larry isn't there. You know, this is not the Dream Team as it was in Barcelona. Was often raised as a perspective. And now at halftime, they are only leading by 5 points. So in a sense, you could understand if the players would focus upon what's going to continue very shortly. Also, there isn't any norm to do what they did. I mean, if there is a norm, then of course you can just follow the norm. But in this case, there isn't any norm. I mean, this is kind of ad hoc situation we saw there anyway. There isn't this kind of routine procedure, pattern to ex-champions getting again in the context of an Olympic Games a replacement for gold they might have lost. The first one to come is Reggie Miller. The second one is Malone. So one is tempted to think maybe they sit next to one another there on the bench. And as this semi-official ceremony unfolds, maybe the other one whispers to the other one, hey, let's go and hug the greatest. I mean, we owe everything to him. And then they move on, and other players follow. And then as this happens, it continues to the Yugoslavian team. It's always possible that something small happens. I mean, you might have, let's say, created what's one of the spearhead breakthroughs of the entire Aalto University. You know, the Aalto University idea is to make pedagogical platforms that on the one hand make it possible for students to meet across discipline boundaries. This on the one hand. But at the same time also the idea is that students would engage in the real world. So you could say this is the entire idea of Aalto University. So where has that idea been particularly far pushed? Right here in Design Factory. So you could say, well, if you have created it, which is what Professor Ekman has done, you could say you have all kinds of things to do, and in fact he was just about to do some of those things. But then he saw this, so there's Esa coming, and he just sort of wants to give the keys because, you know, oh yeah, Esa likes what he calls the Design Factory latte, but I can't go and give it to him right now. I don't know if there's anybody there in the kitchen, but I have my keys here, so Esa, why don't you go and do it? It's possible for human beings to be kind and sort of present to the immediate situation. Seek out for that kind of being by your sideness. Maybe something magical happens. So if you think about the Domingo Mehta case, one of our examples from the first lecture, where we saw one of the greatest tenors in the world at the peak of his powers, all of a sudden becoming more. We used one way we used to describe it was this 1.2 conceptualization. So he seemed to have gotten something extra from somewhere that seemed like something very, very small. And in fact, it seemed to be just the way Jubi Mehta, the conductor, looked at him. That's the way we speculated a human being is constituted, that you can become uplifted, empowered by something very, very small. Now, what we just now saw was some guys coming to hug somebody else. None of them is saying anything. And the only person to speak is Ali himself, who in fact can't really speak because he has lost to Parkinson his somehow ability to speak, but he still all of a sudden does speak. And he whispers jokingly something to Charles Barkley, the captain of the team. You know, the guys they're joking around. This kind of live camaraderie that humor can bring to a given situation. And the whole thing takes place for maybe some 20 seconds. It's astonishing to remark the fact, and I think it is a fact, that if one is tempted to conclude or observe, note that Ali almost physiologically changes. This is a human possibility. So one could ask, why would somebody hold back from doing that? I mean, if everybody wins, and if in many cases it's, when you think about it, when you reflect upon it, it's what you believe in. I would say most people, upon reflection, would respond positively to the question, do you believe in kindness? Do you believe that if a culture, if a group of students, if a nation is kind, that's better as compared to if it's not kind? I would say, well, most people recognize the worthiness of being kind. So it's almost like this aspiration that most people, perhaps all people, are, in fact, their true aspirations would become put aside. And what results is something different. So clearly something is being held back that satisfies these criteria. It would benefit the other, it would help, it would benefit the whole, it would represent your true aspirations. So why do people hold back? Now, of course, one possible answer is, well, people hold back because they just didn't think about whatever they are holding back. So they end up acting, let's say, on the basis of a standard, but the standard is a lousy standard. Let's say in the meeting context, where most people hold back their encouragement in meeting contexts. Most people in meeting context, let's say, hold back their sort of more generous gestures of meeting the other ones. I mean, you might meet the other ones, but you still hold back your more generous ways of meeting the other ones. Okay. But it could be that this is because of the fact that in that kind of meetings, this is the norm. In this kind of meetings, people just behave this way. So one reason for people to hold back could be because they follow a standard, but the standard is a lousy standard. Of course, the person would fairly easily acknowledge and recognize the fact that it's a lousy standard if he or she would think about it, but he or she doesn't think about it. That doesn't take away the possibility to think about it. It's just that people don't really reflect that much. Even on the most obvious things, because people just, in a sense, follow the flow very often, is a fact. Okay, so this could be one answer to the question, why do people hold back? But notice that this could lead to the overall result that if everybody is holding back, then after a while, the picture everybody has individually of the overall situation is based on the fact that people hold back. But they don't conceptualize it from that angle. They just see the person coming to the meeting and not really recognizing anybody there, not really that generously acknowledging anybody here, not really bringing any energy there, not showing interest. So from your point of view, this becomes something that defines, let's say, your partner in your relationship. That's the way he or she is. I mean, you live with the person. So it would be extremely surprising if you wouldn't pretty quickly come to the conclusion, this is the way he or she is. It's not that there would be, as it were, something better, and that something better just doesn't come out because of the fact that the person is holding it back. But he or she could come out with it all the time, anytime. So one way to put it is the following. I mean, we observed during a previous lecture the fact, and it's a fact, that a human being can't help his or her anticipations. So anticipations, the category, is there. The question that only remains is, well, what kind of anticipations? What's the content? But anticipations are always there. But anticipations, of course, for all of us are based on what has actually happened so far. I mean, you don't sort of come up with it. If you live with somebody, you don't want to sort of, in your mind, think about the person something that actually isn't the case. You just base on whatever you think about the person on the basis of what actually has been the case. So on the basis of what has actually been the case so far, you come up with anticipations what's likely to happen in the next instance. And this is just what it means to be a human being, but holding back behavior is easily enforced by the human phenomenon of overemphasizing the negative. Particularly when the negative is something that in some ways hurt you. Because it's so easy to observe the fact that something did hurt you. Particularly if it's something very, very small, the person could have equally well come into the meeting where you are giving the presentation, it's a tough presentation to give. Equally well, the person could have come cautiously. In fact, he could have come in time, but he didn't come in time. And when he didn't come in time, he made quite a lot of noise with the door to start with. And then when going down and seating himself, he again made noise. A person doesn't have to make noise when getting seated. It's just a fact. I mean, did he have to pick up his laptop and open it up immediately? His eyes going in there clearly with the idea of getting certain things done. I mean, surely nobody can deny that there isn't anything here the person couldn't have changed. But if the person had changed some of those micro behaviors there, it would have been considerably different from my point of view, given the pressure situation where I'm at. Is your experience. So much more easily when you are the target, as opposed to you being the one who comes in late, as opposed to you having your intentions in mind. You did try to be on time. It's just that you got caught with such and such and such. It's understandable. You took care of certain important things and so forth. There are all kinds of reasons you have for coming in exactly the moment you did come in. So you have explanations for various discrepancy behaviors from the point of view of others. But when you are the target, you feel the discrepancies. You feel the way the person is overlooking something. You feel him not being generous to something that in fact was pretty impressive. So what happens is that you start to anticipate. The other ones from the point of view of not necessarily the worst, but definitely not from the point of view of the best. But from the point of view of others, this is what you become to them. So you see, one of the hopes I had for this entire class, I realized in advance that it's just 4 events, so it could be that it's too much. But I still had this idea that I've seen in some contexts to take place, that if there is time, people can acknowledge the fact that, hey, we are in this together. We are in this sort of business of life together. Why not sort of be benevolent? Why not be explicitly kind in this context? Why not sort of try to look at things from the other one's point of view and from the point of view of generous encouragement? Temporarily. I have a seminar on Cyprus called the Prof seminar, which I've run now 49 times. 49 times. And it's something to which people come repeatedly. Not in order to hear me speak in some other way as compared to how I spoke the other time. I mean, it takes 1 week So you can't expect anybody to come up with entirely new examples, videos, all kinds of conceptualizations each time. In fact, you can predict, well, it's likely to be pretty much the same in some ways. But your experience could be vastly different. And the reason why your experience could be vastly different is because you happen to start to think about something you didn't think about the previous time. And then you have a possibility to take that thought, whatever it was, to people that you know are benevolent, who are likely to be interested, who are going to show empathy, who are sort of willing to take seriously whatever the experience was. This does good to people, is a fact. But the phenomenon we are there talking about, I believe, is human connectivity, which we in fact hold back almost all the time. Of course, to some extent, we need to get connected, because there could be things that some Excel sheet demands us to do together. So as a result, we need to meet, for instance. We need to exchange some articulated views or positions regarding some interest, let's say. So there could be all kinds of externally definable forms of connectivity that, given the task list, people need to get involved with. But surely there is more to the possibilities of human connectivity than any such task list can define, because it could be that people just want to be connected. So it could be that people enjoy being connected. I mean, if you are supposed to win gold medal, let's say in basketball, it's understandable your focus is upon that task, but you can still might enjoy getting connected to somebody. And not only with this example with the former champion, also with your teammates. So there could be all kinds of rivalries involved, and there often are in these kind of teams. Rivalries because somebody wants to do the baskets, but somebody else also wants to do the baskets. People want to be stars in this kind of contexts. There could be that kind of competition. Who is the greatest star in this final game? But then you are there next to the greatest. And who is so vulnerable. I mean, he can really, his walking isn't that, I mean, he used to be famous for the fact that nobody can catch him in the ring. And you're so touched by his dignity that comes through. He has the courage to come in front of the whole world. So that's a phenomenon that I think is pretty powerful to observe. And in fact, I would go so far as to suggest that it's useful to conceptualize this phenomenon that leads us to be more in the non-kind holding back dimension as a system of holding back. So you step into a system of holding back. So, some of the regimes that the humankind has seen are pretty nasty in this respect. That they might build, let's say, in the form of DDR, a system where you didn't know who is working for Stasi. It could be your son, it could be your father. I mean, anybody can work for Stasi. So therefore, you better watch out what you say in anybody's presence regarding the communist system. So this kind of situations can emerge. But from the point of view of anybody, of course, your image, your picture of those others is based on what they actually do. It's just that it doesn't reveal the truth. So you have to sort of watch out all the time. There's a system in place which creates behaviors and crafts human lives. But similarly, if you go to an IKEA, you go to an IKEA in Finland, you go to an IKEA, basically I would say anywhere in the world, but I know the Finnish IKEAs best. Regarding the phenomenon of kissing. If you ask, well, how often do you see in an IKEA a middle-aged couple kissing? The answer is never. So why don't you see that? I mean, people can kiss. I mean, very often people go to IKEA in order to buy furniture, something to their home, perhaps their bedroom. You know, this is the sacred place of this relationship, this marriage. So there they are contemplating the possibility of buying a lamp. You know, it looks pretty nice. You know, you can dim it. It might look very, very nice in the bedroom. And you have two fabulous children together. You know, grandma is taking care of them as you are there in the IKEA store. So you could say, wouldn't it seem pretty natural to sort of become excited of this fabulous possibility to build our astonishing relationship further still and celebrate that with a little kiss? Well, if you are a student, you know, young age, under 30, you have fallen in love, you know, 2 years ago, I would say it's pretty likely you might end up kissing. But 10 years from that, 15 years from that, 20 years, it's over because the system now is in place. And the system depicts what you can do and what you cannot do, even regarding micro behaviors. I mean, just picking the other one by hand, it's possible. To walk in an IKEA, walk there with your hand in hand. So the system of holding back, it's almost like there's a third partner in the relationship. It's almost like you have a third party in that meeting. Where you're supposed to discuss the two parties that seem to be there, some theme, and some issue, something that where we have dissimilar interest, let's say. But there is a third party. But the third party depicts most of the things. That's the point here. So with this in mind, now think about the following. And now it seems I'm jumping to an entirely different theme, but please follow me here. 20 years ago, in 1997, I was asked to give a speech at the annual meeting of the Finnish war wounded. This was powerful. My father didn't get wounded, but he was 3 years at the front. So immediately I thought he would probably come also to meet some of his friends. And maybe there would be a possibility for me to pay respect to my father's brother who fell the last day of the Winter War. Of course, I never met Uncle Eino, but of course I had been there with my father. In Hyvinkää, where I come from. In that area of the graveyard. Where you see all those little stones. So I prepared the speech very, very well. And I love the Finnish language. There were certain themes, certain rhymes there that I was extremely happy to get in. I had thought about them based on some famous Finnish songs and the lyrics that go with them. So I really love to get them in. And I practiced the speech quite a few times to get the rhythm going in the right way. The only thing I needed to do there was just to read the speech. But I didn't get through even the first page before I started to cry there. This is in front of maybe 600, 700 people. It's just too much. I stumbled through the speech. Wasn't very successful, technically speaking. But what happened a few days later was I got a letter on the envelope that said the name of a particular institution for the war wounded. So inside there was a letter from certain Mrs. Askola, who had been in the audience, and in this handwritten letter she thanked very beautifully, very generously of my speech. As a result, I came to know her. Turned out that she had worked as a nurse during the war. And now, in her late 80s, she was living in this special retirement for the Finnish war wounded. The fact that I had become to know her became known there in the institution itself, and one of the persons from the personnel called me one day and said, "Esa, are you aware of the fact that Sylvie is going to turn 90 on such and such a day? It would be really great if you could come, because we are having a little party in her honor for her birthday down in our cafeteria." Okay, the day was possible, so I went. I joined the queue of people queuing up to her. I remember her, she was standing there, leaning to a chair. She had kind of a crown prepared of flowers, blue and white for the Finnish flag. So there she was, and she was so tiny. She was incredibly short, but radiant. So there she was. Then it's my turn. I offered the roses I had brought. Pretty impressive roses. You know, I'm excited about roses myself. So I like to give roses. So I had these tall, beautiful roses, maybe half her height, that I offered to her. And I remember being a little bit sort of surprised, because my feeling was she wasn't really focusing upon what I'm there trying to give her. Her focus seemed to be elsewhere. And in fact, the next moment proved this is the case. Because what happened was she took the roses, put them on the side table, took my hands, looked into my eyes and said, "Oh, what happiness that you came. Because there's something I have wanted to tell you. And this something is, I pray for you. I pray for you because you speak for families, you speak for children, and you speak for human warmth in a way that makes people listen. said Mrs. Askola on the occasion of her 90th birthday in the special retirement home for the Finnish war wounded. This was powerful. I mean, if you think about, let's say, somebody parking a car, it's possible that the parking of the car is challenging to some extent. So let's say you go with the back first. But it's possible that you can do it almost miraculously well. I mean, the rhythm is right, the ending spot is exactly right. I mean, it can be a tremendous parking job. And it could be that there's somebody who is significant from your point of view in the car, and it's possible that somebody comments on the parking in a way that hits your plus button. It's possible to hit people's plus buttons. You come into, let's say, a design factory, somebody hits your plus button. But the next moment, something can happen that hits your minus button. So it could be that although it's, of course, positive to feel the positive effect of the first instance when somebody hit or something your plus button, the next moment can take the benefit away. It's just the fact of life. Also, it could be that your minus button is sort of more sensitive, so it could be that it triggers more easily. But among the incidents that can lead your plus button being hit is a subclass of cases. The subclass of cases is one where not only are you hit in the plus button, but at the same time as this happens, you somehow verbally perhaps capture something of that moment that brings to your attention and your conscious focus some of your more deep thoughts. You know, some of your thoughts are more surface thoughts, some of them are deeper. The deeper thoughts are typically not that easy to sort of engage with. So it could be that you have to do some work to get into it. Also, there could be contextual reasons to lead you astray to some extent, so that you don't pay attention to the deeper thought. For instance, because it's too simple a thought. So it could be that syntactically it's a simple line. It could be that it's something that isn't mesmerizing in terms of the verbalism involved. It could be doesn't challenge you intellectually. Let's say the theme of human warmth is such. But still it could be the theme of human warmth is fundamental to you when you think about it, but you don't think about it. And therefore, because you don't think about it, no matter how important it would be, had you thought about it, doesn't show in your actions de facto. Which means from the point of view of others, you're holding something back all the time. What could it be? Well, the way you approach the person, the way you look at the person, the way you come into situations where the person already is, you know, it's so many ways through which you can hold back human warmth. And this is, I would say, a tragedy. Nothing short of being a tragedy. Should it be the case that, in fact, it's one of your fundamental, deeper thoughts? Was the theme I started to think through the encounter with Mrs. Askola I just described. Because by that time, I had already been giving lectures. My lectures were already quite popular. At that time, I would have also... This was Nokia's miracle years. So I would have these world tours. It was so exciting, but I'm absolutely confident I hadn't used the expression human warmth ever in the lectures, because it's sort of mundane, it's not sort of exciting, a theme. And particularly in corporate world, you need to be exciting, because everybody's attention is on the next tasks. So therefore, you know, people are so focused upon, you know, getting the benefit. So you need to be exciting. It's hard to be exciting with the theme of human warmth. It's hard to be excited with the theme of kindness. So I'm absolutely confident I hadn't used the expression human warmth by the time I met Mrs. Askola, who brought out the theme. So I was sort of surprised. And I remember leaving her quite touched and seeking out a table where to sit. Then I saw nurses. I thought, okay, I'll go to the nurses' table, because I didn't know anybody there. So I'll go to the nurses' table. There could be people there that have been in some of my lectures or whatever. So I'll go to the nurses' table, and meanwhile I'll gather myself from the emotional state in which the meeting with Mrs. Askola had landed me in. And I remember thinking, well, I don't think I used the expression human warmth. But then I thought, well, actually it doesn't matter if I use the expression. Isn't the relevant question, is the theme of human warmth fundamental to me or not? Because if it is, of course it could take various forms in the way I might end up promoting it to something I believe in. And also what it would mean if the theme of human warmth would be fundamental to me would be that some of the key people to think about is not what used to be my key list of most important persons in my life list. Because it could be that, for instance, my mother, who isn't the kind of character that if you see, let's say, in a train, immediately captures your imagination. Who might this somebody be? Or you meet my mother somewhere, I mean, you don't really start to think about that much, because my mother is not interested to make an impression on anybody. But if you step into her magical circle, which you can, I think, feel when you are close, you feel the warmth. That's her, as it were, challenge the universe statement, but it's not a statement in the form of words. But it's something that I have experienced all my life. And it's just that I don't necessarily think about it. And as a result, it could be that I don't become enriched by the fact that I have gotten so much of this particular kind of human contribution as a receiver. Maybe I should pass it along. And I may end up reinforcing the system of holding back, which in fact is the norm when it comes to, for instance, in this instance, the theme of human warmth. And therefore, if you end up this discussion by reflecting, well, what might be a key characteristic that connects Lady Gaga, the Dream Team guys, and Mrs. Askola? Well, I would say one characteristic that connects them is the fact that quite clearly they are reaching out from some space which is not some spot, some location, which isn't defined by fear. It's some other kind of place they reach out from. In some cases, of course, with Lady Gaga, you can say, well, she's really taking a risk. Like there is this new documentary about her, where she's taking such a huge risk by opening herself humanly, like very few people in her professions have done or would do. Because it's a profession where your role is so important. But he opens herself up. It's just such a risk. But of course, she has taken all her career risks. The way she performs, the way she takes the stage. I mean, she has stepped beyond what the circle of fear would define. But similarly, you might have a social situation, let's say a basketball game, but you might not be defined by the fear of not following a norm, not sort of going by the standard. You just sort of do it. And this is also what Mrs. Askola did. She's supposed to be the recipient. But you don't have to stay with that only. And she might have seen me there queuing up. And maybe she then thought, okay, that's Esa, it's great, he could come. But I might not be that long around. I don't know when I'm going to meet him again. So I'm going to seize this moment and just say what I think regarding some of the things that I believe are fundamental, which is what she did. But that means that she wasn't operating from the zone of fear. And it's that kind of reaching out that I believe we need if we want not to get caught with the various systems of holding back that define our everydays in the normal context. Okay, let me stop there. Thank you very much for your undivided attention. Okay, dear friends, let's continue. One of the thoughts that I'm here working from, and well, I suppose I could say I believe in, is the idea of observing a structure somewhere, and then, as it were, gently transforming that structure to somewhere else, and doing that as a kind of like musical composition or some kind of post-production thing that can happen when you do a film. So you sort of observe something that in fact is already there, but you just bring it to a different context. And one reason why this interests me is, on the one hand, because it seems so obvious that some forms of life have been stronger than others in developing some particular kind of structures. So it could be that you have some particular environment of human conduct where, for instance, the moment of meeting has been developed as a structure in some interesting way from the point of view of respect. So if you think about the, let's say, symphony orchestra, concert, what you have there is a structure where before the concert itself takes place, what happens, this is the very first thing that does happen, is that the conductor, of course, is very visible and who is kind of singled out, you could say disproportionately, because it's 80 people in the orchestra, could be 120 in the orchestra. It's a lot of super professionals in the orchestra. But still, when the conductor comes in, people start to applaud. I notice that this happens even before anything happens. I mean, he or she hasn't really done anything so far. When somebody shows up in a workplace, typically people don't applaud. Okay, so in workplaces, such a structure as you do have routinely for the conductor doesn't exist. But of course it could exist in some form. Then what happens is that the conductor who walks in, before taking his position there in front of the orchestra, shakes hands with the concertmaster, and who's sitting here. It's an interesting position because the concertmaster, the first violin, is sort of like the person that the orchestra looks to. Should we need leadership regarding something? For instance, it could be that you have a guest conductor, but the guest conductor isn't really that clear in the way he or she is doing his job. So what do we do as an orchestra? Well, we look at the concertmaster, and the concertmaster indicates what we do. Or in the applause, if the conductor and the soloist leave the stage and the orchestra stands, when do we sit down? Well, when the concertmaster sits down, then everybody sits down. So she's the representative, you could say, of the entire orchestra. So you could say that it's like the conductor who has been acknowledged from the point of view of knowing what he or she is about to do, so we applaud for it. That expectation, that anticipation is carried over through that handshake to the entire orchestra, because here is the representative of the orchestra. It's sort of like meeting of the masters. We know what we are about to do. So that kind of a structure, of course, could exist in some other contexts also. And you could bring it there, because if you would start to think about it, maybe you could see the other structure, other context where it might perhaps take place. Now, structures, of course, are kind of contingent at the same time. Like if you think about sports, typically in sports, even in team sports, you have the structure that an individual sportsman or woman can become a hero because of the individual grandeur of his or her individual achievement, for instance, in making a goal. So synchronized skating, in contrast, from which this is an image, it's done in teams of 16 skaters. And in addition to that, there are also 2 more skaters that are not on ice. And of course, other people involved as well, the coach, obviously. There is some choreography and so forth. So, but the point is that synchronized skating as a team sport, I think, is unique in that although the responsibility to conduct at your very best during the event itself is undivided. But you can't become singled out in the dimension of stardom at any given time. So this is interesting, because as a structure that's different from the kind of structures we are accustomed to, because most of the time in any context, you sort of assume that there's got to be somebody who is sort of the key person, even, at least from the point of view of some individual moment. Now, if you think about some of the insights, some of the key points of infant research, some of the key points of research that relates to very young human beings, toddlers, let's say a human being at the age of 1 month, is not a passive object. It's not something that only reacts. On the contrary, one of the key points of infant research is to point out that this is a co-creation. It's sort of a system. It's something to which the toddler and the mother both step into. And the fact that they both step into it means that they sort of co-create the something, but within the something, the infant, the baby, the toddler is an active partner. So you could say this is kind of a strange structure. It's not the kind of structure that most of us, most of the time, operate with. Now you could say, well, isn't that kind of fairly obvious form of human connectivity? And you could say, when you think about this from this angle, yeah, it's sort of an obvious and quite fundamental from the point of view of life itself and continuation of life itself, that a human being has this capability to connect even when he or she is 1 week old. So wouldn't that be something that we might be interested in later on as well, is the question here. And I think the key observation is to note that you might not have clear concepts even to describe what you are there after. So the structure could be something that's very, very hard to pinpoint verbally. But of course it still can exist. Just like you say that synchronized skating as a sport does exist. And people can envision what it means to be part of it. Various performances can be evaluated more or less objectively and so forth. But still there isn't the kind of structure that you would expect in any team sport there to be. And that is that an individual sportswoman can single out as the key figure from the point of view of a given performance, at least at some time. So accepting the fact that some activity can, as it were, lead the way means that maybe some of our concepts fall behind. But that means from your point of view that the way you talk about things might in some ways be diminishing you. It could be that it diminishes the kind of possibilities you all the time have when it comes to engaging with other people in rewarding activities. So with this big picture in mind, let me show you 2 minutes, only 2 minutes, of the pretty powerful a video of Lady Gaga's. It's I think almost disturbing, this video, and that of course being one of her trademarks, pushing things beyond limits almost to the spot where they are disturbing. So for instance, dressing up in human meat, in meat, is sort of humanly disturbing. This is what she sometimes, at least once did. And she does these kind of things that are sort of disturbing. Of course, art does that, and I think is supposed to do that. Now, in this case, what she's doing is that I think she's pushing pretty far some of the historically dominant modes of thinking that objectify women. Guys are looking at her behind masks. It could be that there is some sort of golden chin kind of thing that makes the guy to think that he's particularly worthy something. He's singled out, and maybe drinking straight vodka from a glass, huge glass, and stuff like that. So let's look at Lady Gaga's Bad Romance for a couple of minutes. This is at the end of the video, and then I'll analyze it a little bit. Okay, the guy got what he deserved there, becoming a skeleton. And if you think about that powerful video from the point of view of the theme of bad romance, so picking up that structure, you could say that, okay, so you can be in a bad romance with some of your lower motifs, like so you are sort of excited about your lower motifs, but maybe it goes too far, and it's possible that you are somehow entrapped with that something that on some level you know that this is not going to be good. but you're still attracted to it. In a sense, you could say this is Vincent Vega. And that point we acknowledged from him that he goes with the surface delights. That a human, of course, is capable of experiencing. So just like somebody could, more intellectual here speaking, somebody could go with simple, if X then Y, explanations and become excited about that to the extent that he or she blinds his or her way of looking from any other way, for instance, from the kind of co-creational, more connectivity-based way of thinking. Or you could, of course, have a bad romance with the wrong person. I would say this is what you most of the time most conspicuously see around you and maybe have experienced yourself. You just fell in love, became attracted with the wrong person. And it could, in some cases, be the case that, in a sense, nothing wrong with the person per se. But in some cases, it could be that there actually is something wrong with the person, even per se, in the sense that the person is going to behave pretty much the same with everybody else. That he or she wants to get or start to dominate or want to sort of get into his or her sphere of influence. I mean, it's just fact that some people are extremely tempted to objectifying other people. And it could be that the person can hide that this is the case. For instance, because of the fact that the person has such incredible social skills, or that the person can speak in such a way that the way the person speaks makes you feel that he or she really understands you. So it could be that somebody lurks you to traveling to Syria, and you know, excellent possibilities to become a bride, and it's possible that you sort of fall in love with something that is going to burn you if you continue it. But of course, it can be something more abstract. It can be with a habit. So you have a habit. Well, if it's a habit, probably it has worked most of the time in the past. That's the reason why you want to carry it to a new situation, because it has, from your experience, worked so well. Or it can be some mental model. So you have observed that very often it's useful to think about in terms of what caused whatever you have in material terms, or what was the efficient reason, sort of conspicuous something that you can identify as something that, had that not been there, you wouldn't have had what you had as an outcome. So you can have a mental model regarding how the world works. And this is in fact something that the President of the United States claimed he has. He knows how the world works. And it's possible to have a mental model or models that seem to work from your point of view extremely well. But in fact, it could be that although it has worked so far, for instance, blatantly just lying can work to a certain extent. And in fact, you can have supporting structures to that effect in some cases. So you can have somehow submissive people that sort of support your lies. And it can work for some time. So the fact that something works from your point of view can lead to a romance with something that seems to work. But it can be a bad romance. But maybe it makes you crawl ultimately. And maybe the outcome isn't what we just saw happened with Lady Gaga in this video, that as the last possible moment, she was able to still survive. So the guy went to a skeleton, but she did survive. I mean, she's pretty badly hurt, but she did survive. So in a sense, it's the ending of Kill Bill. Of course, in the ending of Kill Bill, the bride doesn't go to the state in which we there saw Lady Gaga to be at the end, because that had happened in the beginning already. But it's in a sense the same structure. Your reaction style, I mean, you do have some kind of sort of patterns of reaction styles. So you react in a particular way to a particular situation. And the fact that it's whatever it is likely to sort of, from your point of view, work. So why not sort of start to question it? And you're having a romance, but it can be a bad romance. Because if at the age of 23 you don't challenge yourself to become more warm from the point of view of other people you happen to meet, you could say that's likely to mean that in the long run, some such things are going to get burned that wouldn't have gotten burned in the years to come had you started to develop your abilities to connect with people more broadly early on. But in order for anybody to start to grow in something, to challenge himself, herself to some developmental process, it's so useful first to acknowledge what the starting point in fact is. So here, this concept, I venture to here call it a concept, this concept of a bad romance could be useful. Also, when it comes to your way of speaking, anybody has his or her way of speaking. But the way of speaking that you currently have doesn't have to be your way of speaking 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but it's likely to be pretty much the same. Also, in the sense that whatever changes are going to happen in your way of speaking are only going to be a function of the immediate demands in various contexts. So you start to adopt some vocabulary that in business world, if you are in business world, is dominant at a given time. It's sort of obvious, the change in your way of speaking, but of course you could have developed your way of speaking. You could have developed it to have more nuance. It's possible for a human being to pay attention to nuance. That being one reason why somebody might want to read novels, to gain access to the theme of nuance. And not only as a theme, but also feel it. Here the bad romance could be with your way of speaking. I mean, it does work to some extent. And surely the fact that you are here means that it has worked. But the romance part there might turn out to be a bad one, because it could be that it leads you to crawling. Although at the current time it seems it's very tempting, it's very attractive, it perhaps worked your self-image. We have images of ourselves. And the images we have of ourselves, they are not imaginative. It's not that you sort of would have used your power to just sort of make figments of imagination and then somehow claim that is the case. I mean, whatever your self-image is based on what has actually happened. But at the same time, as this is the case, of course, there are also interpretations regarding what has happened. And the interpretation, of course, could have slightly different tone if you did manage to somehow reframe the experience. It's this capability that a human being has in the dimension of system 2, in Kahneman's terms. The system 2, this reflective capability we have, means that you can reframe things, put things as they're in different mental context. And it's there where you might have a bad romance with your current self-image. In my seminar just last week, I had a case where somebody said he's very, very talented in his math skills and in physics, as is the case for quite a few of the students that come to the School of Science. But he said that I always thought that I'm not really a language person. And a person can come to such a conclusion in school, for instance, on the basis of the fact that there are other things in which he or she excels. So he or she puts a bit more effort there and excels a bit more. At the same time, it could be that there is somebody who already is excellent, let's say in languages. So in comparison to this somebody, you're clearly so much behind that, I mean, it's just no comparison at all. And not only now, but also in the future. So you come to the conclusion that you don't really have the head for languages. Although we know, as a matter of fact, that any human being has a head for languages. Any child can learn 4 languages as easily as 1 language. So it just be the case that in his or her environment, 4 languages are being systematically spoken to her. You could say, it's freaky. Yeah, it's freaky, but it happens. But you don't have to sort of think about it. It could be that at the age of 20, you're convinced of the fact that you don't really have head for languages. But then you come up with the idea that, let's say, for some particular project, you really should learn some Hungarian. That you in the bus start to look at some application that teaches some words in Hungarian, and maybe you listen to Hungarian. It's not a big thing. It's 20 minutes to let's say Kamppi, so why not listen to some Hungarian? So you start to listen to some Hungarian, but you somehow get the rhythm maybe. Maybe you're sort of a drummer. You like to play drums, and you somehow just get into some of the rhythms of Hungarian, at least in that particular application. And after a while, you know some Hungarian. Is what happened to this one student that is in my seminar. But the problem there is that you can stop that from happening by having that self-image fixed that says that, well, I don't have a head for languages. So that self-image makes you, in comparison to the alternative where you start to learn, for instance, Hungarian, crawl. You can be having a romance with your own problems. Because it could be that your feeling of your problems is at least familiar, at least you know what the problems are. So should you be able to somehow get rid of your problems, or some of them, who knows, would be the next problems. I remember one writing by James Hillman. This is a writer, sort of a Jungian psychotherapist, writer that I hold in particular esteem, James Hillman. In one of his pieces makes this point that some people love their problems, which really struck me because in a sense this is Vincent Vega once again. If you think about Vincent Vega, there's something charming about him. And one reason why there's something charming about him, I think, is because when somebody is in some sense ease with himself or herself, it is sort of charming. So I think this is part of Trump's charm, that he's so excited about himself, that you in some sense, start to feel that there's got to be something about it. So simply being so sure is a reason somehow to look with some esteem to whoever is sure. But this might mean, from your point of view, that the thing you're sure about, in fact, is going to make you crawl, because it is a problem. But you refuse to give it up. You sort of refuse even to sort of take a little stand where you could look at, hey, what the problem is, and just have a little chat with somebody. You know, do you think this is big thing? Is this small thing? What do you think? So putting the thing in context. With your star qualities. And I would put this consciously in quotes. Of course, in some cases, somebody's qualities can also be socially singled out so strongly that the person can think, hey, this is really me at my very best, and this is highly respected. In some cases, it's just that something is desirable in some context, some ways of thinking, operating, influencing. Could be your star qualities, but you know what we know of any sport is that you can't overplay your stars. You're going to be in trouble sooner or later if you put the person too much to play. So because it's a team sport. I mean, you are a team effort. You have a number of characteristics. The point is they work together. Now, the fact that something is so outstanding, let's say your articulative powers, your analytic powers, doesn't mean that you wouldn't have other powers as well, that in fact could support those current star qualities of yours in striking ways. But it could be that you have a bad romance with your star qualities, meaning that if you just play with those, sooner or later you are going to crawl, relatively speaking at least, with the upside aspects of assholism. This is amazing. You know, people when they study typically have the following rough idea of what it means for somebody to be a manager, of the kind that is respectable, that one can value, things like, you know, he's fair, she's fair, doesn't make a number of himself or herself, certainly doesn't claim to his or her credit things he or she didn't do, but on the contrary, brings to the fore people that he or she is the manager for. Kind of things. Is consistent because there's integrity about the person. So the person isn't fluctuating here and there, because from the point of view of others, you know, it's going to drive them crazy when you don't know what the boss is actually even thinking. Is willing to listen, in fact wants to listen, wants to support others. You know, these are trivial features when you think about it before you are the person. Then when you are the person, you know, it might turn out that your asshole index has grown amazingly. But you don't observe it because you don't keep track of your asshole index. And one reason for this is because you don't really think about how you influence others, how you come across to others, what's the experience of others of you. With your own self-centeredness, any human being necessarily is to some extent self-centered. This is healthy. But you might have a romance that might turn out to be bad. It just goes too far. With values that do not aspire with your deep aspirations. This is basically where we started out from. Remember the holding back discussion, the discussion that highlighted Mrs. Askola and the theme of human warmth. Basically was based on the observation that somebody can have aspirations. Somebody might sort of feel that, you know, kindness is good. But it could be that the context in which the person's life takes place doesn't seem to value, let's say, kindness that highly. It could be it's not that cool. So as a result, given the fact that you every day live in that environment, you sort of gradually start to forget what your deep aspirations in fact are. But you do always have some values. So you study finance, you study something that is considered cool and seems to deliver considerable benefits, and that's fine. Being instrumentally able is important in context where we want to get things done through the particular kind of domain of instrumentality we might face. But life is more. But you might have a bad romance with some of those narrow values that seem to be considered cool in that particular context. And then, of course, you can have a bad romance with an entire lifestyle. It would start to seem more and more obvious. This is the case pretty widely. So at least it's something that we might want to keep an eye on. Now, this entire discussion of or application of the perspective of bad romance, I'd like to place in a particular context. I mean, think about it this way. Here is one way to think about empathy. That is from a book that has made quite a big impression on me. I saw it as a title first. Sorry, where do I have it? There it is. It's the title of the book is The Science of Evil. It was reissued later on with another title. Maybe the publisher had second thoughts. 0 Degree Empathy, if I remember right, is the second title for the same book. But this is pretty explosive a title, The Science of Evil, by the Cambridge professor Simon Baron-Cohen. So he's there exploring evil. And the idea he has about evil is that evil is basically made possible by a lack of empathy. And at the same time, by the fact that people also have excitement to approach things from a systemic point of view. So you have this kind of simple conceptualization, systematizing, and empathizing that he's working from. And the theme of systematizing might lead you to study some phenomenon. For instance, how do some particular textiles work vis-a-vis temperature on human skin? It's a possible question. This question can be highly important for some particular grander purpose. So this is from the book. I think it really is a disturbing book. It's written with crystal clarity. It doesn't sort of, I think, overemphasize the points, but this is the kind of stuff you find in there. This is two Nazi doctors there excitedly exploring the effects of particular textiles on a particular human body. And you can sort of sense their excitement. And I mean, if you are, let's say, an architect, you are excited to build impressive buildings. So if you are given a chance to build exciting buildings, you seize the opportunity. And except it could be, you're located there somewhere in the middle. This is sort of a possible way that could, from inside, block you. So if you would feel how other people feel, you could say it's harder to do certain things to those other people if they're extremely harmful for a human being. So empathy is one way to prevent us from doing things that are bad. It's not a necessary condition. Sorry, it's not a sufficient condition necessarily. Because it could be that conceptually you frame those people as people in quotes. So in fact, they're not really people. And you might have some way to emphasize this externally, that they're not people. I mean, look at, there's a number on the person. It's not a real person. And when people are executed by shooting, it's sort of a disturbing thing for basically anybody to shoot another person who is helpless. What helps the case is that you just blind the person's eyes that are going to get shot. It doesn't really look like a human being properly. Very small difference makes a difference from the point of view of those soldiers who are supposed to shoot. And it's but the empathy curve, if you think about this, from my point of view, triggered the following line of thought. When I saw this, I thought, okay, I'm there somewhere, maybe somewhere here, but most certainly wherever I am, my special lady is further in the height direction when it comes to empathy. I mean, she just is more empathetic than I am, is a fact. And in fact, some of the things that I've learned from her, which have been very difficult for me to swallow, often in retrospect turned out to have that logic of me somehow getting into the shoes of somebody better. And then as a result, realizing something quite small that I can do, but I haven't done because I've had a pattern of not doing so far. But now I see what it means to the other person, so I'm going to do it. And of course, I can immediately all the time do it, but at least I can point myself in the right direction. Means from your point of view, from my point of view. That it's sort of useful to think about where might you be in the empathy curve. But wherever you are, it doesn't mean that you couldn't push yourself using your system more to the right. And look at what can happen if you don't do it. I mean, here is something that to me was very powerful and sort of strange when it happened. It's from Oscar Gala. The Oscar Gala comes out quite early in the morning, Finnish time. So I never watch it. But the special lady and me, we have roughly 6 hours time difference. She likes to be awake all night, basically. And I mean, she's in many ways so unique, but one of her features is she likes to stay awake when I want to sleep. Okay, so the morning after Oscars, she was still awake, which is unusual, but in this case she was. And as I was preparing to leave, she said, just in passing, there was quite an impressive performance by Lady Gaga in the Oscar Gala. That to me was sort of surprising because, first of all, I was surprised that she had watched the gala even to that extent because she doesn't really watch TV. Also, she's not really interested that much in pop music, in popular culture phenomena that has happened just a few hours before. It's not sort of one of her primary concerns in any way. So I was a little bit surprised by this comment. But I didn't think about it that much. I had other things to attend to. Then when I came home, she said, there's going to be this show of the Oscar Gala that's coming out, and you might want to take a look at as how Lady Gaga performs there. And I was even more surprised. How could it be that there's something, I like Lady Gaga, I'm impressed by Lady Gaga, but there's so many videos I haven't watched even from her, although I use her as an example. I mean, I just don't have the time to look at everything that somebody might think is interesting. No, anyway, she kept on pushing. So eventually I did look at the Oscar Gala. And then sure enough, at a certain moment, out comes Lady Gaga behind a grand piano. And to my surprise, she's dressed in white. She's not dressed outrageously. It seems sort of a little bit surprising. Then the song starts, and to me it seems like she's overperforming. I mean, doesn't she realize that this is the Oscar night? She seems somehow to go, as it were, beyond some limit. And I was surprised by the way she was performing. Then what happens is that you see people appearing. You can't first see them individually, but it's a group of people behind there. And as these persons come closer, you start to realize that could it be that these people represent the phenomenon she's there describing in this song, which describes sexual violence? I mean, this is stunning. And also knowing that she has herself been assaulted. I mean, maybe the fact that she goes, as I felt, over some kind of professionalism and its demands is reflecting off the fact that she's really putting herself on the line. But she's still a performer. These other people, it turns out, maybe let's switch the lights off for just a moment so we see it better. I mean, it's clear that these other people, I mean, these are not professional performers. They are just regular people. But these regular people, they have these texts in their hands like unbreakable, or it happened to me. I thought this is so powerful. This is working from some other spot, some other locations compared to one defined by fear. To come in front of the Oscar audience. So it's that possibility of stepping behind the whatever has happened with dignity, and also creating the space for others to do so. That brings me to this last point. Maybe we can put back the lights. I mean, of course we want to develop our executive mindset. We want to get things done. We want to learn skills, competencies, so forth, techniques, tools that help us to get things done. We want to work from some well-defined goals. We want to have strategies so that we get the things we want to get with the efforts we put in a cost-effective way and so forth. We want to have a winner's attitude. Like we are in the country of Finland, it's clear that we need the winner's attitude. I mean, it's a small country. So you can't play with quantity. You somehow have to have, let's say, a sportsman, that the sportsmen somehow make it, although there are so many more sportsmen that come from another country, or whatever there are quantitative advantages that some other places might have. So obviously all this is what we want to have, but at the same time, as human beings, we are more. Meaning we could have a bad romance with all that. So you could have a bad romance with that side of yours, which is goal-directed, which develops its getting things done skills, its executive whatever competencies. You could have a bad romance there. Because it could mean that you start to push aside your moral sense. You could start to sort of downplay even the inner instinct to feel empathy. But that's likely to land you in trouble. Not necessarily with an external circumstance, but with what could be called the better angels of your nature. That being, I think, a powerful phrase from Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address days before the Civil War. So this was a situation in the United States where Lincoln had been elected the president, but some states of the so-called United States built their economic system on slavery, which meant that individual, fine, value-driven, beautiful families were dependent on slavery. And using the terminology from our Lady Gaga video, you could say, well, they were having a bad romance with slavery. But that's our way of conceptualizing. This is not the way anybody conceptualizes his or her bad romance when you are in the romance. You need to have, as it were, the reflective distance to see that the romance you have is potentially a bad romance. So Lincoln is days away from Civil War, but he ends his presidential inaugural address with the words, "The better angels of our nature," recognizing the fact that we have so many sides to us. But if we conceptually think about it dualistically, you could say, okay, there are certain characteristics, certain tendencies, certain ways of thinking and acting in me that represent more my better angels than others. It's a metaphorical way of speaking. You could say that, somebody acknowledges the fact that kindness is good, human warmth is good, that's the better angel. But the better angel might have a difficult case to become heard, because it could be that your mind drives in so many other themes as dominant, that you gradually start to become used to yourself as somebody who doesn't turn to his or her, your own better angels, using this Lincolnian metaphor. So my hope regarding these 4 lectures, these moments we have here at Design Factory together, would be that it would give you some space internally, using this terminology for the better angels of your nature. Bonks, dear friends, let's stop there. Once again, thank you for your undivided attention. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Today was a really special lecture, at least for me. We covered some really important topics, and the lecture was called Lady Gaga in Otaniemi, which is quite interesting. What are your feelings now after our 3rd lecture?
Well, I feel very happy of the way this particular lecture unfolded. I felt it was pretty tight without getting squeezed. I think the tempo was breathing, and my feeling was that we could go pretty deep as we went into the lecture and into the unfolding of the lecture. Unlike on some other times, I had left open the way I would try to lead it, and was therefore hopeful that I would get support from the participants in the way it would go, and because I felt it this time particularly co-creative. Also because of the fact that I was quite tired when we started. I feel so happy that it came out the way it did. I think, well, my feeling is that we did do justice to some of the themes that we there tried to cover.
Yeah, I think so too. It was really beautiful. Now we have one more lecture ahead of us, and how do you feel about that? We still have about 2 weeks to go.
Well, my feeling of this 4-part structure is that it's very exciting. It's a structure with which I haven't really been working, I think, before. And of course, this time, because we are doing this in English, it also means that I have to do a lot of choices regarding what to pick up and what not to pick up. But at the same time, I can keep in mind basically all the themes that have been covered. So regarding the ending, I hope it's going to be in some way majestic. But let's see if we'll be able to do it.
I'm pretty sure we will, and hopefully we'll maybe see the Queen here as well. Thank you, Esa.
Let's hope she comes. Thanks.